Hi guys, this is Mick from CipherTown.com, and today I'm going to talk to you about a really cool new product from Creative Crafthouse. And they are a unique little company in Florida that makes a line of puzzles, games, and boxes and other types of cool products. Among them, they are making a line of wooden cipher devices. Some of them very classical devices from history, and I have one here today. It is one of their newest products, and it is called the Alberti Cipher. It was designed in 1467 by a real genius called Leon Baptiste Alberti. It is the first example of a true polyalphabetic cipher, and we are going to be using it today in something called Method 2. There are a couple of different ways of using this. This Method 2 is a more secure method of using it. I'm going to start out with an easy example, and then I'm going to proceed to a little more complex use of it, which is much more secure. This device is different than some modern ciphers because it doesn't have all the letters in our English language alphabet. That's not a problem. I'm going to show you the workarounds. It has one movable wheel on the inside here, and this outer wheel has 24 symbols on it, of which are 20 letters and 4 numbers, 1 through 4. On the inner wheel we have again a matching 24 symbols. 23 are letters, and we have the ampersand sign right there. So with certain techniques and using this, we're going to do some pretty nifty encoding. This device comes from a time when people took their time doing things, so it's not an immediate process. It requires some thought, some creativity on your part, and some pre-processing. There's a little bit more pre-processing to do today sometimes because we have to use what's called digraphs for the missing letters. We're going to be using the device, which is really nicely made, by the way. It's got a real solid base on it. It's made of some real quality woods, and it's deeply lasered. It moves really easy. And they just started selling this. I think there's a limited production run at present. I'm not sure how many more runs they're going to do of this, but it's at a very, very good price as well. So if this type of thing interests you, you may want to pick one up. Besides the cipher disk, we are going to be using a little dice tray and these two D4 dice, which are actually 12-sided dice with the numbers 1 through 4 in Roman numeral written 3 times on them, so that we can generate the numbers 1 through 4. We have a nice little dice tray for throwing here, and of course we're going to be using the whiteboard. The whiteboards work great for encrypting things because you can just wipe them off when you're done, and you have no trace except for maybe your encrypted message. Today we're going to be doing an example using a password. Passwords are great to encrypt because having passwords hanging around your house and maybe a notebook or something written in plain text form is not that bright should your notebook get stolen because they get all your passwords. So encrypting them can be a pretty smart idea, and this is one way you can do it. So to start out, I decided I'm going to use this password today. For example, Dragonfire 696. It's good to have a number with your password. It makes it more difficult to guess. It's also very good if your password has nothing to do with you, because people who like to guess passwords If you've ever seen movies like War Games or something like that, try to learn as much about the person, because people are usually somewhat vain or think that they have to have passwords that are associated with themselves in some way or fashion. It helps them to remember or something like that. So this password is just a random password. It has nothing to do with me, just an example. Okay, first thing we need to do is to look at the letters that are used and to see if we need to make any substitutions. Now with the Alberti Cipher, the inner disk is called the cipher disk, okay? The outer disk is called the plain text disk, okay? So what you have here is the 20 letters that are here and the four numbers to use in encryption. For the 6 letters that are missing from here, we are going to use what's called digraphs. Digraphs are kind of a language thing that you use when you talk about 2 letters representing one sound. We're going to use them in kind of the reverse form today. But on the Alberti outer disk, the plain text disk, there are these letters missing: H, J, K, U, W, and Y. That's on the outer disk, okay? On the inner disk, there's just J, U, and W missing. Essentially, the word Jew. This J-U-W was missing because it simply was not part of the Latin alphabet, okay? The other letters that are missing here, the H, the K, and the W, and the Y, Alberti felt weren't really necessary, that there were other ways to use the Latin language, and these letters really weren't used all that much. More importantly, he wanted to make room for the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's say the Arabic numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So let me erase this a little bit here and we'll go on. But before I do that, let's just look quickly to see if any of these letters are in our password. Do you see any? H, no. J, no. K, U, W, Y. So there's no reason to do any substitutions here. So we don't have to worry about that at all for this example. Okay? So let me clean this off and I'll be back with you. Before continuing on, I do want to cover the digraphs just really quickly. I'll do a separate video on this later. But for H, we're going to use F, F. For J, we're going to use I, I. For K, we're going to use Q, Q. For U, we're going to use V, V. For W, we're going to use X, X. And for Y, we're going to use Z, Z. Now, since much of this is all customizable, you really don't have to use these digraphs for the missing letters. You can come up with your own solutions, but this seems to work rather well because these letters are seldom found stacked up against each other. And actually, historically, sometimes these letters were just replacements in a singular form for another. For example, August, the month, has 2 U's in it. But of course, this is an ancient word, and the Romans always spelled it you can see the V is used for U. So you could write August like this and you would probably figure it out. Either that or you'd think it's something to do with AVG. I'm not sure. But of course with the digraphs you could write it with like that. Okay? And some of these digraphs actually kind of are pretty easy for your mind to get a hold of. For example, hello. It's going to be F-F-E-L-L-O. And you can kind of see an H in here with the two F's beside each other. So your brain will kind of click on to that. Same with, for example, world. We'll replace this with the two X's. And you can kind of see almost kind of a W in there in a way. Okay. You could also, of course, just use two V's. You would probably get it. You can maybe switch these around. Like I said, I'll do another video which is completely about digraph substitutions, and we can talk a little bit more about that, but let's go on with our encryption of Dragonfire 696 now, okay? Okay, since we don't have to make any digraph substitutions here, as far as pre-processing goes, we just have to worry about our Arabic number component here. The Alberti Cipher does have a full number system. It's a base 5 number system, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can turn this number into base 5 number, or simpler, in what we're going to do today, we're just going to represent this number as a Roman numeral. Now you may be a little rusty on Roman numerals, but they're pretty easy. I'm not going to give a Roman numeral lesson right now, but the symbol for 500 is D. You add a C to make 600, so that's 600. For 90, it's going to be 10 minus 100, or X minus C, or X in front of C, I should say. And 6 is, of course, V with an I next to it. So this is our Roman numeral equivalent to the Arabic 696. So we're just going to rewrite this over again. I'll plug this in up here, and we'll go ahead. Okay? Right, so what's the next step? Now we have our Dragonfire, and we have the 696 and Roman numerals up here. Well, the next thing we need to do is to pick a key. So because this is a internet type thing, we're going to use the public key, which I like to use, which is P over B. So I have my P lined up over the B, and I can just kind of put that on the side here to remind us of what we have, P over B. Okay? So now we have to insert rotational commands. And what these are numbers 1 through 4 that are going to get injected within our plain text message here, which is in this case, of course, the password. So how do we do that? Do we just randomly throw in numbers? Well, we could do that, but human randomness is really not random at all. So what we're going to do is we are going to use the dice to help us do that. So we'll start off. What we're going to do is we're going to say this black one will tell us the number of spaces we'll go forward before we'll put in a rotation command, and this white one will denote the number of the rotation. Okay? So roll. And we get a 4 and a 4. Okay? A 4 and a 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to go D, R, A, G, that's 4 over, Remember the black says go over 4. And then add a 4. The white was a 4. Okay. Now we're going to go back and roll again. Now this is a 1 and a 4. So I write O and then another 4. Okay. We go again. Now we go a 3 and a 3. N, F, I, 3. Back to the dice. We go a 1 and then a 3. So we just add one letter. We go 4 and then a 3. E, T, C, X. There's the 4. Now we add the 3. And we get a 2 and a 2. See that? 2 and a 2. Okay, so we go over 2. Remember we're on the X, so we go C, V, we do a 2, and then we just have the I left, so we won't add any more rotational commands. Okay. So it's a little cramped here. I'm going to rewrite this. But as we can see here, excluding the numbers now, we still have the exact same thing. These numbers are going to give us instructions to turn the disk. When we hit a number, we are going to turn the disk 3 spaces, 4 spaces. This inner disk, called the mobilis, we're going to turn, depending on what they tell us to do. That will change, essentially, the ciphertext alphabet in relative, or in relation, I should say, to the outer disk wheel. Okay? So let me write this just a little cleaner, and I'll come right back. Okay, so here I've just wrote this over for a little clarity, and I have broken it up into groups of 4 because it's just a lot easier to encode when you do things in groups of 4s. So here are all our rotational commands. 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, and 2. Each one of these we are going to rotate the inner disk. Now, as we're using a relatively simple method here with no starting keyword or other type commands which would decide what these mean or how they're going to be used, we're just going to use a rotation to the right. And for a lot of people, this type of coding will be enough. Just taking the standard Dragonfire 696 and turning it into this is in itself a form of obscuring the code or obscuring your password. But remember, it's just here because you're going to ignore all these numbers when you decode, because you're going to get this when you decode. You're going to look for the numbers. You're going to go, okay, DRAGONFIRE, and then DC. You'll be like, DC, oh yeah, Roman numeral number 696. DC, XC, VI. So it's all right there. And these numbers added in we are going to use for controlling our rotations. So now we have done all the pre-processing necessary to encode Dragonfire 696. First thing we're going to do is set up our Alberti Cipher so that it is on B over B. And for the first 4 letters, we are not going to change this disk orientation at all. We're just going to go find them, which is a pretty easy job to do. All you do is look up what's written down on the outer disk and write down what you find corresponding on the inner disk. For example, D is now Y, R is now C, A becomes Z, and G becomes M. Okay. Now we need 4. We go around to the 4. 4 becomes V. Now this is very important. Okay, now that we've written down the 4, before we continue any further, we have to move this V 4 spaces to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now it's 4 spaces to the right. Now we can continue with the next letter, which is an O. The O is now a Q. And then we have another 4. We're doing the same thing again. We write it down. The 4 is now an N. And then we have to encode an N. But do we encode the N yet? No. We've got to move 4 spaces to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. It just happened to be an N on the inner wheel as well, but we are going for the N on the outer wheel, remember, because that's a plain text wheel, so that will be an X. Okay. Now we continue on with the F and the I and the 3. F is R, I is V, 3 is C. You see, it goes along rather quickly. It's not as laborious as you may think. Since we're on a 3 now, we have to move this over 3 spaces. So just look at the 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now C is moved over 3 spaces. Okay. So we continue with the R, which is a Y. Oh, we have another 3. The 3 is a D. Notice how it's changing. Now the 3 is a D. We go over 3. 1, 2, 3. And now we do an E. The E is a C. The D is an A. The C is a B. The X is an S. The 3 is an I. We rotate. 1, 2, 3. We do the C, which is an H. We do the V, which is a Z. We do the 2, which is an S. One final rotation. 1, 2. And we do the I, which is a D. Okay, I'm going to stop here and just double check myself to make sure I didn't just screw up when I did that. Whenever you do this, you really have to check your work. Okay, go back over, make sure you did it right. The way you do that is just to do the reverse. Take this and see if it becomes this. And then you know that your cryptogram is correct. Okay? So let's stop here for a minute. Okay, so I just checked my encryption over and it was completely correct except for the last character where I wrote down a D instead of a B. So I'm glad I checked it. So now I know that I have a good cryptogram here that as long as somebody had the P over the B, they could follow along if they had an Alberti cipher and if they knew how to use this method as it related to these. And if they knew that we were only doing rotations to the right, they would be able to get this message above. And then, of course, they would have to knock out these numbers before they could read across what the password was. So when I would go to store this, I would store this separated into groups of 4, and I would capitalize them. Now, one thing that's very important when you're using the Alberti cipher, occasionally within the ciphertext here, you will end up with an ampersand sign. Okay? It's very important with the ampersand sign that you replace it randomly with one of these letters, J, U, or W. You do not want to leave the ampersand sign because it's a tip-off to cryptanalysis type guy that, this is an Alberti cipher. So you want to remove that, okay? If you're just going to leave your cryptogram like this, pretty much as long as you don't run around advertising to everybody that, hey, I used an Alberti cipher to do this, you're probably going to have a pretty decent, secure cryptogram here, okay? For most people. Can you crack this? Yes, you can crack it in this form if you have lots of time and lots of talent, or preferably if you have a computer and you want to write a program to crack it. The way it stands now, to crack it, we would pick any index. Let's say we'll start with an A, and we will just go along here with the first 4 or 5 or maybe 10 letters and see if we get anything. Then I would move it to the B, then I would move it to the C. How long would it take before we'd hit it? Well, in this case, we use the P over the B. So if we were lining up over the A, you would have to go all the way to Z. Okay, you would have to go to Z. Remember, we started on the A. So you would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. After 12 tries in decoding this, you would have the P over the B, and this would decode out DRAG. Then you would have to know that this means rotate 4 to the right. You would have to do that and follow along, and you could get this. Okay, so as it is now, it's secure. It's not super secure. So we need to do something else to make this super secure. And I'm going to show you how to do that next. Does it require a little more work? Yeah, it does. Just a little bit more. But what it does is it removes the simple instructions that we have here now. Okay. I don't want to discount the value of this as it is because, you know, it's a pretty darn good cryptogram here. I don't think, you know, too many people are going to crack it, especially if they don't have this. In fact, also the online Alberti ciphers, there's a couple of them, they don't seem to work with this. You know, if you plug this in, you get gibberish. So I think it's a pretty secure code just as it is, but we want to make it ultra secure, and we do this by implementing slightly different process and using code books. So we're going to cover that next. Okay, we'll take a little break here. Okay, so how are we going to make this more secure? Well, we are going to use one of the really unique things about the Alberti cipher, which is the ability to insert multiple numbers together as kind of codebook entry. And by doing so, we are going to give instructions as to what this means. So not only do you and your compatriot, you and your receiver, have to have the cipher, but you also need to have the crib, as it is sometimes called, or the codebook. And of course, having a codebook is a responsibility, but it elevates this to a totally different creature. Okay? So what we're going to do is, very early in the encryption, we are going to add a codebook entry. So I'll take this away, and I will bring in another whiteboard I have over here where I have written down the same thing. It's a little bigger whiteboard, so I do have to reset up for it. So just hang on one second here. Okay, so now we have rewritten over our pre-processed Dragonfire 696 with the randomized rotations, but here I have inserted 4 more characters. I have inserted an LC and a 1-2. Now this LC is a little bit of a code for Libro Codicis, or codebook. You could just as easily put CB. But I'd like to throw them off with an LC. And 1-2 is one of the numbers we can make with our numbers on our Alberti Cipher outer disk. See, when this thing encodes the numbers, they're always obscured, they're always hidden. We only see letters in the ciphertext, so that's a really cool feature of this. Anyways, this Libro Codicis is referring to a codebook entry. This particular codebook entry is going to control what these other numbers mean. They're not going to mean what they meant in the first encryption, where we used default values and rotations just to the right. Okay? So let's take a look at the Libro Codicis LC12. Now we may have an LC11, which just means resume normal operation, like we did originally. And we may want to do that with, some things. But on other things, we may want to kick it up a notch. And so by instructing the decoder to use LC112, we now add rules to these numbers. Okay? And it says here, numbers do not have face values. Okay? So it's no longer just 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're no longer just going to the right. If it's a 1, on the first occurrence it equals a 2, then a 4, then a 6, then an 8, and so on. Make all rotations to the left. Okay? If it's a 2, on occurrence in a line, rotate. If it's on the first occurrence, it equals a 3. On the second, it equals a 1. On the third, it equals a 4. On the fourth, it equals a 1. On the fifth, it equals a 5. And on the sixth, it equals a 9. And repeat if necessary. If you have a bunch of 2s in the line, you probably would never have more than 6. Probably no need to rotate. 3, rotate to the right. First 7, then less 1 on every other occurrence. Okay? And 4, rotate to the left, ascending primes with each occurrence. So the first occurrence is going to be 1, and then 3, then 5, 7, 9, etc. Okay? So as we go ahead and code this now, we have to keep in mind our new rules that are put in place because of LC12. Okay, so let's look at see what we got here, because we can make some notes on what we have to do so we don't get mixed up. It's also a little tougher on the decoder now because they have to pay attention to what's going on as they decode it, or they will get lost. Every time they get a number, they have to look at the number, see what it is, look at the rules, and also look at how many times it is occurring. Okay? But now this totally, to use this phrase, screws the pooch for any type of cryptanalysis, because it's not following any type of logical pattern anymore that they can see. They don't have the code book. These are all pretty randomized type things happening, and it becomes much, much more difficult to try to find out what the heck this is all about. So let's look at our numbers here and see what we have to do, okay? So let's first look, see if we have any ones. Well, we don't have any ones, so we don't have to worry about the ones. What about the twos? Do we have any twos? Let's see. Well, we have, remember, we're not going to do anything with this because that's the codebook reference. Let's come over. We do have a 2 on the end here. And what is the rules for 2? It says on the first occurrence of the 2, it's equal to a 3. So we're going to put a little note here in red that this is equal to 3. And we have to rotate to the right, so I'm going to put an arrow under that so that I know we have to go 3 to the right. What about 3s? Do we have 3s? Yeah, we have 2. We have 3 3s. 1, 2, 3. So we come down to 3, and it says rotate to the right. 7, and then less 1 with every other occurrence. So, and this is, of course, rotating to the right. So I'll put the arrow on top. I think it's easier. Rotate to the right. We're rotating to the right. We're rotating to the right. And then we go 7, 6, and 5. Okay? And now we do the 4s. We have 2 4s. The 4s are primes. 1, then 3. And we are rotating to the left again. So, okay, so to the left. 1, 3. Okay, and let me just rewrite this one at the end here. So it still is matching the others. This was a 2, which means we start with a 3. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and re-encode. We're going to re-encode. We are still going to encode the numbers, but we are going to move the disk differently, because now the disk movement is controlled by this rule. So let's see what we get. Okay? Now we're still going to start off with our P over B. So we just get our P over B. And then we start to encode. So first we look for a D. Just a Y. And then an R. Which is a C. Then an L, which is an I. And then a C, which is an X. And then a 1. Which is a P. And a 2, which is an R. Then an A, which is a Z. And a G, which is an M. Now the 4, we write down as the V. You remember in the other method now we would rotate 4 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But now we go 1 to the left here. That's all. Now we go on with the encryption. The O, which is a B. Another 4, which is now a Z. Now this is the second occurrence of the 4. Under the rule it's primes, so we have a 3 now. So now we go 3 to the left. 1, 2, 3. Now we look for an N, which is a C. Now we're looking for an F, which is an H, an I, which is a D, a 3, which is an X. Now we're under the rule for 3, under LC12, which starts out with a 7. So we have to go 7 to the right here. So that's a pretty good rotation now, isn't it, huh? So let's go ahead and we'll move 7 spaces now to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now we're 7 spaces to the right. We go for an R, which is a D. We have another 3, which is now an N. Make sure you stay lined up good here. We now go 6 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We now do an E, which is an N. We do a D, which is an L. Do a C, which is a K. We do an X, which is an H. We do a 3, which is an A. Now we have to move 5 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we look for C, which is a B. Look for a V, which is a Y. We now need a 2, which is a Q. Now remember, we go 3 to the right now on this. 1, 2, 3. And finally we do an I, which is a C. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and check my work here now. I'll stop for a minute. Make sure I have this correct. And then we'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so I just went ahead and checked my work, and surprise, surprise, I was correct first time through, which is good. And you should always check your work. What you're doing here, remember, is you're crafting a cryptogram. You're hand crafting a cryptogram, and you're doing it in such a way that it's really going to be a problem for anyone trying to figure out what it is, and also it's going to be a nightmare for anyone trying to program some type of automated solution to what you're doing here. One thing to pay attention to is when you do use codebook entries, either CB or LC, followed by 2 numbers or 3 numbers or 4 numbers, the rule is that you do not do a number shift. You do not insert a number rotation until at least 2 spaces after. I guess you could do it after 1, but 2 is a little better. And LC is usually not found together unless could be a number, but then it would probably be with other numbers and make more sense. I mean, if not, this would be like, you would not see 2 numbers together. 2 numbers together always denotes a codebook entry. Okay. So whenever you see LC or CB or whatever you'd like to use to denote, hey, here comes a codebook number, you could use ZZ. No, don't use ZZ because that's used for digraph substitution for Y, but you could use something else. But LC seems to work pretty good. When you see this, you know you've got a codebook entry here. So this set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 2 left over is going to be your very encrypted version of Dragonfire 696, and you can pretty much paste this anywhere you'd like. Because the entry is pretty simple, you can see the DR with just doing the PB. That's probably enough of a hint if you've forgotten what your password is. DR, you're like, oh yeah, DR, Dragonfire. That may be enough to give it to you. And of course, as long as you have your Libra Codices somewhere, preferably on a piece of paper, folded up in maybe a, I don't know, secret box or something, then you can always refer to it. This is just one codebook entry. You can have many. There are 16 2-digits, and then many more 3- and 4-digit numbers you can use for a total of 336. So you can have a whole bunch of codebook entries to use. Don't use the same one over and over again. Use different ones. Make up your own, and you'll have a very secure code. So I hope you have enjoyed this rather lengthy video on how to use the Alberti Cipher. It is definitely a more hands-on type of cipher device than some of them. Requires some creativity. You can see we have a little Latin here, silentium est aureum, which means silence is golden. Also 2 keys, the cross keys, kind of a nod to maybe the Vatican. Of course, they're going the wrong way though. The keys don't face out like in the Vatican symbol, they face in. And it's all about silencing your world, which is what we're doing here. So I think it's a really cool thing. Got to thank Creative Crafthouse for making this really fantastic product. It's really well made, and it'll last your lifetime. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you stop by ciphertown.com and join a forum so that we can talk about this. Maybe you've got some other ideas on how to use this, and I'd love to hear from you. Okay? Thanks for watching, and have a good night.